Labour have just announced a huge crackdown on immigration, the strongest policies that we have ever seen in the UK, except it's obviously all a lie and a scam, and these supposedly tough Danish-style policies are actually all specifically designed to sound tough, while still letting millions of immigrants into the country, whilst protecting illegal immigrants in particular, and stealing our democracy away from us by giving these people the right to vote as well. So in this video, we're going to cover exactly what the supposed proposals by the new Labour government are, what they claim is going to help fix this migration crisis, and I'm going to break down every single little thing wrong with it. So let's start off by just taking a quick look at what exactly they are proposing. Now, these aren't all of the points, but we're just going to go through some of the biggest, most important ones. Starting off with refugee status, or asylum seekers, basically. In a document outlining the changes, the government warns being granted refugee status is to essentially receive the ability to live in this country forever, and that must change to reflect our changing times. Yes, they are right. Someone with refugee status is basically allowed to stay here forever. So Labour have announced that they're going to make this become a temporary thing instead, and it will be subject to review every 2.5 years under a core protection offer way down from the 5 years of initial right to remain currently offered. Anyone granted refugee status will be removed as soon as their home countries are deemed safe, while the wait for permanent status will be quadrupled to 20 years. So two things there that are supposedly really tough. Anyone granted status will be removed as soon as their home countries are deemed safe. Well, the biggest problem is that the largest asylum seeker nation is Pakistan, where there is no war going on. And there are literally thousands of successful asylum seekers here in the country right now from Albania, where it's entirely, totally safe. So these countries are not deemed safe by our courts at the moment. They will never be deemed safe by our courts in the future, which means this status here will never be revoked and they will always be allowed to stay here. The next thing here is they will have to wait 20 years. They'll have to be in the country for 20 years before they are given permanent status and allowed to stay. I hate to break it to Labour, but if someone's been in the country for 20 years already, they've already got permanent status. What's the point in restricting permanent status until someone's been in for 20 years? They've already been here for 20 years. They are a permanent fixture of this country at this point. They've already been allowed to stay for 2 decades. I'm 27 years old, by the way. You can take almost the entirety of my life. And that's the length that Labour think you should have to stay in the country before you're allowed to stay in the country forever. Absolutely ludicrous. Let's move on to the next one. Safe and legal routes. Refugee charities often claim that the reason so many people cross the channel is because there are not enough safe and legal routes that asylum seekers can take to the UK. So the government has said it's going to introduce new routes for those arriving on those for work and study. They could be offered long-term status in 10 years, subject to consultation. Local communities will be able to sponsor individual refugees granted asylum, like the Homes for Ukraine scheme. So, safe and legal routes. Labour are making a political calculus move here, basically thinking that the reason everyone's so anti-asylum seeker in the UK is because they're coming on small boats. I hate to break it to Labour, but that's not the case. We're anti-asylum seeker because we're anti-illegal immigrant. We don't care if the government makes it legal for them to come. We still don't want them here. And so just making it legal for them to come doesn't fix the fundamental problem. Again, they could be offered long-term status in 10 years, subject to consultation. It's the exact same problem. Labour admitting that they're going to let these people stay for 10, 20 years in the first place before they then let them stay forever. They're still in our country. The end outcome is the exact same. And then finally, local communities will be able to sponsor individual refugees granted asylum, like the Homes for Ukraine scheme. Now, let's be clear, this will be in addition on top of the already, monumental costs that are held by taxpayers. And I doubt the costs will actually be placed on people either. You will get benefits if you accept a refugee into your home, and of course it's going to be abused by people who want to create ethnic enclaves within the United Kingdom. People like probably Shabana Mahmood herself. She wants as many Pakistani people in the UK as possible because she is Pakistani and she loves her culture. That's fine, I just don't particularly want it in my country. But what this program is going to allow is for any Pakistani who's already in the UK to essentially sponsor the visas of other Pakistanis and invite more of them into our country, with the idea being that they've been sponsored by a local, so it's okay. Labour have said that they're going to be deporting more families. They said that there's been a hesitancy to deport families that can lead to pervasive incentives, such as people risking bringing their child to the UK illegally on the assumption that this will make them less likely to be removed. To change this, there will be no automatic right to family reunion for refugees unless they successfully enter the protection work and study route and become eligible to sponsor family members, which they will obviously do with support from the government. Again, the government is just going to say that these people aren't refugees anymore, they're just legal immigrants. They've also stated that children won't be separated from parents during deportations either, and there's no court in the UK that is ever going to consent to deporting a child, which means we won't be able to deport their parents either. Next, we have financial support not guaranteed. That's one of the biggest sticking issues with immigration at the moment, is that so many people come to this country and they aren't a net benefit to our country. They aren't helping us, they aren't making our culture better, and they're costing us money, us taxpayers money as well. Currently, the government has a legal obligation to provide support to asylum seekers who would otherwise be destitute. But the government says that they will remove this, right? Housing and weekly allowances will be discretionary and no longer guaranteed. Okay, they'll be discretionary, but they'll still be given out. This just won't be legally mandated, but Labour will still give them the money because they're not going to allow them to work, are they? Well, actually, they are going to allow them to work. Those with the right to work in the UK who can support themselves will have to support themselves. What that really means is that Labour are going to allow asylum seekers to come here and work a job legally, which is going to increase the pull factor and basically invite more of them here, because now they can even get a job and make more money. They won't be paying taxes with that job, will they? Because they're not going to make much, but that's enough. Next, we have a new body to speed up appeals. This is pretty unimportant, to be honest, because again, the issue is not the backlog with appeals of asylum seekers, because all of them are given asylum regardless of how bogus their claims are. The issue is our government lets them into the country and gives them free money in the first place. Running through their process quicker isn't going to fix the problem. It's just going to result in them no longer being illegal immigrants and now being legal migrants, according to Labour. And then a human rights law change. Both the Tories and Reform have been advocating for us to leave the ECHR, something I am personally incredibly confident we need to do. The Prime Minister, though, he is a globalist. Keir Starmer is a globalist. He puts global interests above British interests, and he will never leave the ECHR. So Labour say that they're going to reform the ECHR instead, which, by the way, people have been trying to do for decades, just like with the EU. It is not possible to reform a globalist organisation because they are set up exactly the way they're supposed to be. The purpose of a system is what it does, not what it intends to do. The ECHR's purpose is to flood Europe and the United Kingdom in particular with mass immigration. That is why it exists. It is also superior to our laws here in the UK. As long as the ECHR exists and is applicable to UK law, nothing we can do in the country can violate it, which means you cannot reform it because it is a foreign court with precedence over our domestic courts. It is the supreme sovereign power within this country. And one more really important thing that I found is Shabana Mahmood, the person who's put forward all of these proposed changes, has threatened to impose visa bans on 3 countries in particular unless they take back their illegal immigrants: Angola, Namibia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. They'll have 1 month to start cooperating from about a week ago. So the really important thing here is that Labour are branding this as a Danish-style system, which is supposedly heavily inspired by Denmark, but it's not actually harsh or unreasonable. It's just that the media elites, the globalists, the socialists who control all the institutions here are so left-wing that they're biased and impacting them, and so they're claiming that this is an incredibly right-wing policy, when in reality, it's just common sense, and actually it's still a little bit weak. Perfect example of this is that asylum isn't a path to citizenship under these new Labour proposals. It's just a place to let you stay until your home country is safe. Now, that's a very, very reasonable thing for asylum to be, yet the left-wing media elite and the establishment are out there claiming that this is a fascist policy, when the vast majority of British people agree this is how asylum should be. Another perfect example of this weakness, though, is in particular related to these 3 countries that Shabana Mahmood is threatening if they don't take back their illegal immigrants, right? She's only threatened 3 countries, Angola, Namibia, and the Congo. The single largest country which is abusing our immigration system, the single largest nationality of illegal immigrants in the United Kingdom right now and over the last year is Pakistan. Not Angola, not Namibia, and not the Democratic Republic of Congo. So why is Mahmood out there targeting these 3 black Christian countries which really don't have that many illegal immigrants in the UK, instead of targeting her homeland where her parents were born, where all her family's from, where she speaks the language, where they have the same religion as her and the exact same culture? Well, I don't think it's too far to state that Mahmood doesn't want to punish and target Pakistan and threaten to take back their visas, because it would impact her personally, because she's been corrupted and captured by these Pakistani interests. That is the single country that it makes most sense to target with visa bans for not taking back illegal immigrants, but she isn't doing it because she's Pakistani. Now, this has obviously been a very contentious issue, but it's been most contentious with the left wing of the Labour Party themselves. And so we're going to go over a couple reactions from the left to these proposals by Labour. Starting off with this Labour MP here, Tony Vaughan. The Prime Minister said in September that we're at a fork in the road. These asylum proposals suggest we have taken the wrong turning. The idea that recognised refugees need to be deported is wrong. We absolutely need immigration controls, and where those controls decide to grant asylum, we should welcome and integrate, not create perpetual limbo and alienation. The rhetoric around these reforms encourages the same culture of divisiveness that sees racism and abuse growing in our communities. So this Labour MP is incredibly unhappy with this new Labour policy. Let's see what The Guardian have to be saying. How did it become fact that our asylum system has been broken by the people fleeing war rather than by those who run it? The insanity of a deterrent involving deporting 4 people to Rwanda at a price of 700 million is now giving way to ministers breaking more than 70 years of convention to offer not sanctuary but suspicion. If we want to stop the boats, we need to stop the bullshit when it comes to what creates refugees and how to respond to them. Parliament is gripped by fear that asylum shopping is widespread. It is. And that bearded men peruse policy documents before jumping into dinghies and heading for Great Yarmouth. They don't read the documents because they can't read at all, but they do gossip amongst themselves, and they have friends and cousins and family members and brothers who are here claiming asylum and getting free money, getting free benefits, and that spreads. Even those who recognise X is not a credible source from which to make asylum policy seem resigned to the idea that there are votes in treating all those who ask for help as likely to abuse it. Not all, but 90% of asylum seekers are actually illegal immigrants here in the UK, and they are not deserving of public funds. In response to a far-right challenge, this Labour government is proposing to keep victims of torture or persecution in a perpetual limbo by only offering them temporary sanctuary. Why should it be permanent? If it does become safe back home, why shouldn't they then be deported? Of course they should. If they wish to stay, they'll have to reapply for refugee status every 2.5 years. Oh no, God forbid they have to fill out a piece of paper and get given another right to stay every 2.5 years. What an awful thing for us to do to these people. Rather than being able to apply for indefinite leave to remain after 5 years, they will have to wait 20. Again, this person is acting like this is genuinely torture. This is not just performatively cruel, it's economically misjudged. This woman, first of all, goes on to claim that asylum seekers are a benefit to our economy. They're not. Asylum accommodation costs in the UK have spiraled because of delays in processing, apparently. It's because we're not going through their applications quick enough. It's nothing to do with the fact that they get free money when they're here, of course. In reality, if this policy becomes law, the UK will require ICE-style raids to remove people. Good. That is what's required when you have more than 100,000 illegal criminals in our country. The number of people seeking refuge in the UK has increased in the past year. That reflects not a generosity of our system, but the chaos of the rest of the world. Really? Actually, that's not true at all. Israel-Palestine is less violent and less of a problem today than it was a year ago. The Ukraine war has been exactly the same over the last couple of years, and refugees from Ukraine has reduced massively. Sure, there's a little bit of a problem in Sudan, but the vast majority of the illegal immigrants that we're seeing are Indian and Pakistani. They're not coming from war-torn Sudan. Finally, let's see what the BBC have to say. Now, this problem, the backlash from the left of the Labour Party in particular, matters because the government is going to have to legislate to bring in some of these changes. They can't just, wave a magic wand and change the law. That means there will be votes in Parliament, so the extent of opposition to these rules, especially within the Labour Party, will determine whether these new proposals become law. Certainly, there is tangible anxiety about this amongst Labour MPs. Far more have publicly questioned Mahmood's proposal, and those MPs who are concerned range beyond the usual critics of Keir Starmer on the left of the party. So he is facing a massive rebellion about these policies. There is also a minority, though a significant one, of Labour MPs who feel local pressure to speak up for the rights of asylum seekers. In fact, it feels like the split on this issue within the Labour Party is less conventionally ideological and more a question of whether the challenge that MPs are facing at the next election is likely to come from parties of the left or the right. And what they mean by left or right is from those who are reform and want to protect British people and not prioritise foreign people in the United Kingdom versus the people on the left or the independent Muslim votes who are really voting on single issues like Gaza and immigration. Now, what this means is that Labour's going to really struggle to implement these plans. They've already struggled with far, far less impactful reform to winter fuel payments and disability payments over the last year. It's incredibly unlikely that we can see the Labour Party unite and to actually get this kind of policy pushed through law. A rebellion is almost a certainty with this package, and so we're not going to see any change on asylum policy or immigration policy whatsoever. Most Labour MPs and most Labour members don't think that Labour is losing because they're too left-wing, but because they're too right-wing. They genuinely think that them moving to the right is what's causing them to fall in the polls, nothing to do with their pandering towards foreigners at the expense of British people. Courts as well have jurisdiction over asylum policy in the United Kingdom. They have to declare it legal. Foreign courts, the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights in particular, has the ability to tell us we are being illegal, we're breaking the law by not allowing asylum seekers to stay in our country, and Labour is refusing to even consider leaving the ECHR, so it is literally impossible that they're going to be able to reform our system and get this sorted. And all of this talk of rebellion peaks with this really interesting interview that we saw with, I believe, Clive Lewis, who essentially offered to give up his seat for Andy Burnham to challenge Keir Starmer as Prime Minister and leader of the Labour Party. He offered to give up his seat to allow Andy Burnham to challenge Starmer for the Labour leadership. There'd been ongoing speculation that the Mayor, Burnham, wants to take on Sir Keir Starmer for the job, but he would need to be a Member of Parliament to do so under Labour Party rules. And Lewis was asked on BBC Live if he was willing to step down from his seat to allow Burnham to return to the Commons and put country before party, and he basically said yes. The reason this is a little bit more of a news piece than the previous examples of other people maybe stepping down to let Andy Burnham try and become an MP, to then challenge Starmer, to then try and become PM, is that actually Clive Lewis is in a safe seat. His majority at the last election was about 15,000, whereas the other seats of, suggested people who could fall on their sword to let Andy Burnham take a go at the top job, they've got majorities of, say, 500 or only a few thousand because of the rise of reform. Clive Lewis would have a good chance of giving up his seat and it actually going to Andy Burnham. 90% of Labour MPs, on the other hand, would not. Now, what I'm really pleased about when we're talking about asylum seekers and illegal immigration and immigration as a whole is that legal immigration is actually the biggest problem in this country, because the Tories let in literally millions of people that has fundamentally changed our society, and the Overton window is shifting. It is now acceptable to talk about legal immigration as a problem in this country, whereas literally just 1 or 2 years ago, it was completely unacceptable and it got you cancelled and actually had the police knocking at your door. And you can see this with this article on the Telegraph. Let's stop pretending the immigration crisis is all about boat people. It isn't. Almost all of the government's woes are linked to record population growth, but the problem has been growing for years. Asylum seekers are just the most visible problem regarding immigration, but mass legal immigration is far more important and far more impactful when we talk about how it damages our lives as British people. And so it is incredibly important that we keep shifting the Overton window to ensure that once the asylum system is fixed, that legal immigration is then fixed as well. It is not far enough to fix the asylum system to stop these illegal immigrants from coming here and taking from us taxpayers. We need to go further and make sure the exact same is the case for legal immigrants as well. Otherwise, we end up with Labour just changing the law and making it legal to come across in a small boat anyway. Now, the final really quick thing I want to talk about here is about net migration, because I keep seeing people talking about net migration as if it's the be-all or end-all of statistics that we should be paying attention to. It absolutely is not, because it is manipulated by British people leaving. We recently got this headline and news article out from the BBC about the Office for National Statistics, who put out that net migration to the UK was 20% lower than previously thought. That sounds like a good thing. 20% fewer people came to the UK last year than we previously thought. However, when we actually take a look at this, The difference between those entering and leaving the country has been revised down, still stands at a ridiculous 345,000 people for last year, but the driving factor for this change, for the revision downwards, is that more British nationals left, were thought to have left, than actually recorded. So 100,000 fewer Brits are now living in the UK than earlier thought. That means that the total number of people in the UK didn't go up by as much as we thought, but the number of British people went down, actively went down. That is a massive problem because you can't just take 1 million Pakistanis and replace them with 1 million British people and expect society to stay the same. These people have grown up in a different place, they follow different religions and customs and cultures, and they are different people. And if we want to keep Britain as the United Kingdom, if we don't want our country to fall apart, we need to make sure that we are still majority British or English or Irish or Welsh or Scottish, and net migration figures are disguising that. 10 million Brits leave and then 10 million immigrants come in, net migration is zero, and the legacy media, the globalist elite, the politicians will claim that there's no problem with immigration. But the tax base will collect, because guess what? Pakistanis in the UK are not net contributors to the tax base. They cost the country and the government and the taxpayer more than they pay in. Unemployment will skyrocket. Again, Pakistanis in the UK are far more likely to be unemployed than native British people, and our culture will disappear as well. More Brits are leaving the country than we earlier thought, and that is frankly because of the disastrous Tory and Labour governments who have destroyed this country. Of course, if you want to tell me I'm wrong or disagree with me, you can leave a comment down below in the description. If you really want to help me out though, what I would ask for is that you just share this video with someone else. Someone who maybe doesn't actually know about this or isn't, in this sort of space of online discussion and debate where we think it's okay to talk about immigration like this. We need to stretch the Overton window. We need to get more people happy and comfortable talking about this because it is the single largest problem facing our country. So share this video with a friend, family member or co-worker and do your bit. The UK is in an economic hole. Wages haven't increased in about 20 years. National debt is at its highest level since the end of the Second World War, and the wealthy are leaving the country after being taxed too heavily. And with the Labour budget coming shortly, more tax rises are almost certainly coming, even after we already saw the largest peacetime tax raid